Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. Let's take a look at a video.
Yeah, and it also says that marriage is between one man and one woman.
The Bible says absolutely no such thing, and Genesis 2:24 is not an exception because that text is not prescribing, delineating, defining, or limiting what marriage was. It's not even describing a marriage. It's just observing the fact that pair bonding takes place and then using this myth about the first woman being created from a chunk of the body of the first man to account for the occurrence of pair bonding. It's not saying this is all that marriage is allowed to be. It's saying, you know how guys go off and pair bond and create independent kinship units? Well, it's because the first woman was taken from a chunk of the body of the first man. Ta-da! It is not a prescription of any kind, and one of the clearest indicators of that is the fact that this text was written during a period when polygamy was normative. Not everybody practiced it because not everybody could afford to maintain more than one household, but during this time period, nobody ever had anything negative to say about the practice itself of polygamy. That would only happen centuries later, when Greek philosophical and social conventions began to influence Greco-Roman period Judaism and early Christians, but none of that is anywhere in the New Testament.
That abortion is the killing of an innocent child.
The Bible says absolutely no such thing because it never addresses the question of abortion, but it does address the question of when a fetus becomes a person, and the Bible has contradictory ideas about that. It has more explicit ideas, and it has ideas that we must infer. The more explicit ideas are throughout the Hebrew Bible, and this is the idea that the fetus becomes a person at birth when it draws first breath, because breath is considered the fundamentally constitutive element of human life throughout the entire Hebrew Bible. So much so that two words that are used to refer to human life and are frequently translated into English as life, ruach and nefesh, actually mean breath. And another indication of this is the legal treatment of a fetus as more property than person. We see this in Exodus 21, where we have legislation about what to do should two men who are fighting accidentally injure a pregnant woman and either cause a miscarriage or cause her death. If the injury kills her, that activates talionic justice, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, indicating she's a legal and moral person. What happens to her is done to the perpetrator. If the injury results in a miscarriage, the husband imposes a fine because the fetus was considered a piece of property, and specifically his property. So that's the more explicit view. The other view is not explicit in the Bible, so we can only infer it. But that is the view influenced by Greek philosophy that shifts the understanding of life as not about breath, but about the presence of a soul. When did ensoulment happen? When did the soul enter the body? And Greek philosophy had three different schools of thought. The Epicureans and the Pythagoreans said it happened at conception. The Aristotelians said it happened between 40 and 90 days of gestation, somewhere around the quickening. The Stoics said it happened at birth. There's debate within early Christianity. Probably the majority view is leaning into the Epicurean Pythagorean view until the 4th century CE, when Augustine says no, it's the Aristotelian view. Abortion is unseemly prior to the quickening, but it does not become murder until the quickening, when the fetus becomes a person. That was the consensus view within Christianity until the 19th century. But that's not in the New Testament. But what we do have in the New Testament is the suggestion that that was the view of personhood in Luke's story about the supernaturally orchestrated fetal leap of John the Baptist, which would fit with the notion that John the Baptist became a person at the quickening. But again, that's something that we must infer because that's not explicit in the text. And if you'd like more information, I go into a lot more detail in my forthcoming book, The Bible Says So, What We Get Right and Wrong about Scripture's Most Controversial Issues. Chapter 7 addresses the claim that the Bible says abortion is murder.
That Jesus is the only way to be saved, and that the church is to be a city on the hill and really the conscience of the state and not sit back idly by.
So we got some problems here too. That's not what the Bible says. In the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:14, Jesus says, "You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid." The idea being your good behavior will be an example to the rest of the world. And no, there's no part of the Sermon on the Mount that talks about abortion or that talks about demonizing gay folks. What Jesus does say, though, is blessed are the poor, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers. Jesus also talks about mercy elsewhere in the book of Matthew when he says, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, quoting Hosea 6:6, and then accuses his opponents of meticulously following the outward performances of the law as identity markers while neglecting, quote, the weightier matters of the law, like justice and mercy. So let's consider for a moment the comment to which you are responding, which says, your book says to feed the poor, forgive debt, and love the neighbor, among other things. I don't see much of that happening. And I don't see much of you endorsing that part of the book, the weightier matters of the law, in this response. I see you saying, no, I just want to talk about these right-wing authoritarian identity markers. I want to explain why I'm right to be demonizing gay folks and to be demonizing abortion and to be saying, no, the Bible says I'm allowed to grab the levers of political power. No, it doesn't. If the book of Revelation has any say, you should be fleeing from the levers of political power. Jesus never endorses that. Jesus is telling you to put the weightier matters of the law, exactly the things that this comment is talking about, ahead of your praying on the street corner to be seen of men, which is what you do when you stand there and you belligerently wave the flag of these right-wing authoritarian identity politics and insist that structuring power and values and boundaries in your favor is what the Bible says to do. That's absolutely laughable. And the fit for this video has been Spider-Man.